Hey, welcome to our Property of Exponents extension video. Now this will not be assigned for homework or anything, but some just harder, more challenging problems that will definitely get you more college ready for those entrance exams like we talked about in class. Also, there will be no preview problems at the end of this video. This is just more to help you with more complicated problems and such things like that. So here, these problems are just going to have a combination of all the properties that we've looked at so far. So this example, notice that we have negative exponents, we've got parentheses. I'm going to say follow PEMDAS and do the parentheses on the bottom first. So let me just rewrite my numerator again. And how will we get rid of those parentheses on the bottom? Well, we're actually going to have to distribute this power of 3. Make sure it goes to the coefficient as well as the two variables x and y. Okay, so what we're going to have going on the bottom will be 4 cubed x. Now remember, power to another power, we will multiply those. So 3 times 3 on x. And the same with y. Those are 2 powers, so we're going to multiply them 2 times 3. Okay, now next up, let's clean up the bottom and put it in its as simplified as we can before we start looking at negative exponents and things like that. So 4 cubed, remember that's 4 times 4 times 4, which that would be 64. 3 times 3, so we'll have x to the 9th on the bottom. And then 2 times 3, we'll have y to the 6th. Now, my next suggestion would be, we got rid of the parentheses, so now let's focus on negative exponents. So this x with the -1 exponent, you know, he's going to need to come to the bottom. So that's where we would go next. And you know what, I'm going to start down here now, so I have enough room. 8y to the 4th is all we have on top now. And for the sake of being side by side, let's have that x to the 9th that's already down there, and I'm just going to put the x that we're bringing down right there beside it, since they're the same variable. But now remember, we also still have that y to the 6th that's down there. Now, this has a positive exponent of 1, and I've got 2 x's, so I should combine them so I only have one x term down there and make my life a little easier. So, whoops, let me change back to the black. 8y to the 4th. Sorry, that's a bell here at school. When we have 2 x's that we're trying to combine, remember we add those exponents. So 9 plus 1 would give me 10. And I still have y to the 6th. Now, I got rid of one problem, but I still have another. I still have 2 y variables, correct? So, I need to combine those as well. And now remember, we talked about in a previous video what that means. We have 4 y's on top, 6 y's on the bottom. Which is bigger, 4 or 6? And hopefully you'll agree with me that 6 is bigger. So that means y is going to stay on the bottom. But what's the difference between 6 and 4? I'll have 2 left over on the bottom. Now we should look and see, are we done? Well, I have x and y. They're not repeated. They're only written once. There are no negative exponents. There are no parentheses. However, 8 and 64, you know what, I can reduce that. If we think about as a fraction, they share a common factor. So the biggest factor that divides both 8 and 64, well, they're both divisible by 8. So really, we should divide out an 8 to make sure that this expression is as simplified as it can be. So I'd have a 1 on top, 64 divided by 8, 8 on the bottom, and just rewrite my 2 variables. And this would be my simplified answer. So that one was a little bit more work. There were a bunch of properties all in one problem. Okay, so let's go to another one. We've got 2 sets of parentheses, so I would say pick one to work with, and then we'll pick another one. So let's just work left to right. I think that would make the most sense. We've got negative exponents on the inside of this first parenthesis. So let's move those first, like we did in our day 2 video. So 3 would stay on top. However, x is going to have to go to the bottom and y is going to go at the bottom. And remember, yes, there's not a fraction there, but you can always make it a fraction. So that's why those guys are going to the bottom. So we'd have x squared, y to the 5th, those powers turn positive. However, this guy on the outside, he still stays negative. Okay? Let's go ahead and look at this guy, I guess, while we're at it. Again, I've got a negative exponent in there, so we got to move him, this y to the negative 4th. We're going to have to move him down. Same thing, there's no fraction there, but make it 1. So you can see where he's moving. So we're going to have 3x and a positive y to the 4th on the bottom. Now, we're ready to kind of regroup and take a look what's going on. I've got a negative exponent outside of this first parenthesis. So we need to flip this first fraction. So x squared y 5th on top and 3 on the bottom. And now this 2 becomes positive. Now the second parenthesis, you know, there's really nothing else I should do with him, so we're just gonna tack him on for the ride. Now this first parenthesis, I'm still working on him. I need to distribute this power of 2 because I need to then multiply these 2 fractions together, but I gotta get rid of that 2 that's kind of standing in my way, if you will. So I'm not going to write it out like I did in other videos. Power to a power, 2 times 2 would be 4. Power to a power, 5 times 2, would be a 10. I was about to write a 5. Woo, that was a big eraser. I got to rewrite my y. Oh, and I lost my 4 on the x. Yikes. Okay, there we go. And then down at the bottom, 3 squared, not 6. 3 times 3 would be a 9. Okay, so that's what I get after I distribute that 2. Now, normally we drop the parentheses after we do that, but I'm multiplying it by another fraction, so I guess I'll keep them in there for now. All I'm going to do, though, is just multiply across the top and across the bottom, because that's how we multiply fractions. So we're just going to write this guy as one big fraction. So I'm going to come down here. So it would be x to the 4th, y to the 10th, times 3 and another x on the bottom, 9y to the 4th. Okay, on the top, I've got 2 x's that I should combine together. I've got an x to the 4th, and I've got an x here that, remember, he technically has a power of 1. So when I'm combining them, remember, I add the exponent. So I'm just going to kind of rearrange it. Let's write that 3 first. The x, I've got a 4 and then a 1, so I add them to a 5, and I have y to the 10th. On the bottom, 9y to the 4th. Now, I've got 2 y's on the top and bottom, so that should be the next thing that I focus on. I've got 10 on top, 4 on the bottom, so obviously which is larger? The 10. Hopefully you're agreeing with me. So 10 on top, 4 on the bottom. So when I get rid of the 4 on the bottom, that means I would have 6 left on the top, because the difference between 10 and 4 is 6. Now, the last thing that I can do, 3 and 9. Hey, if you think about those as a fraction, they both share a common factor that we should divide out. They both are divisible by 3. So let's do that. Okay. So I'd have a 1 on top, x to the 5th, y to the 6th. 9 divided by 3 would be a 3 on the bottom. Now, technically, a lot of professors and teachers, you don't need that 1. So I'm just going to go through and erase it. They say that if there's a 1 there, you haven't written it completely simplified. So we'll be proper and get rid of the 1 because I don't need it. But no x's or y's are repeated. I can't reduce my coefficients anymore. There are no exponents. So I'm done. That would be my simplified answer. So you see, that was a lot of work, but we got there. I've got one more example where we're going to add fractions. Let's see. I've got a place for scratch work because we're going to come across some different things that we haven't seen before. But what I'm going to start with is this negative exponent because, you know, inside there are no negatives. So let's flip this guy first. So x plus 1 would go to the top, 2 to the bottom, and then we'd turn that to a positive 2. And over in the other fraction, there's a negative x. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. There's another negative exponent, so we need to move this whole parenthesis up to the top. This whole thing has to come up to the top. So we're going to have 1 times 3 to the x to a now positive 2 over 2. Now, multiplying by 1, that's not going to affect me, so just so I don't get confused, I'm just going to erase that because it's not going to change my problem anyway, you know? So, I now have to distribute this square, but we have to be careful. Before, you know, we distribute it to the coefficients and then to the letters. This is an expression, x plus 1, so here's actually what's going to happen. We're going to take that whole thing and square it, all right? And then we also need to square the 2 on the bottom. So, oops, 2 squared would be 4 plus 3x squared over 2. Now, what is this? X plus 1 squared. Well, x plus 1 times x plus 1, because you know that's what a square means. And then if you remember, we just need to FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. So we would have x squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1. So add these guys together to get x squared plus 2x plus 1. So that's what's really on the top of this first fraction, x squared plus 2x plus 1 over 4. If I look at the second fraction, what else can I do with him? I would like to get rid of his parentheses too. This is like what we're used to from our videos. We just have to distribute the 2 to both things. Since there's no plus or minus sign, both parts of that need the power. So 3 squared would be 9, and then obviously we're going to have x squared. But now this problem, notice we want to add these two fractions, but to add fractions you need the same denominator. So I've got 4 and I've got a 2. Well, I think it makes sense to make both fractions have a denominator of 2. So you do that by multiplying the second fraction by 2. So I'd have x squared plus 2x plus 1 over 4. He didn't change. But the second one, I've got a new fraction. 9 times 2 would be 18x squared over 4. Now they're both the same, so I'm just going to add the tops. I'm going to run out of room, so I better do this. Let's come up to here. So I'd have x squared plus 2x plus 1 plus 18x squared. All of that over a 4, because you know you keep the two denominators, you keep whatever was there. All right, so add like terms, and it looks like we've got 2x squared terms to add together. So that would turn into 19x squared plus 2x plus 1 over 4. All of these numbers, 19, 2, and 1, you know, I can't reduce by dividing each of those by a 4, so this is my answer, and I am done. And that completes our video, so have fun. Thanks for taking a look at the extension problems, and keep learning.